I'm doing very well. It's hard to say I'm doing great, but these are very strange times. These are dangerous times, and we're getting to the point now where things are starting to break, and I'm starting to notice it. So, yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm showing my face again. I've decided that I'm going to show my face from now on. For many years, like from 2010 to 2018, I did not show my face. And that wasn't because I'm a homely looking ugly fellow. It's because I wanted my face to change over the years and not resemble my passport. But they can find out where you are in approximately 20 seconds. So,
Mm.
you know, I used the virtual private network for a while. They know where we are. I don't worry about that anymore. So let me just describe a little bit about the background. My background is a bachelor's degree in computer science. When I was in college, let's just be serious about this, be honest about it. I wasn't very mature. I wanted to do some computer programming. I wanted to learn how to use computers, and I didn't want to study really, really hard. So I didn't do my math as a major, and I did not get a degree in mathematics. I got a minor. I took a number of courses in math and statistics, but I got a computer science degree. And that helped me enormously when I began the master's program at Carnegie Mellon, because I was the lead guy in programming for my class. There was another guy older. He was the lead guy in his class. So the two of us provided a lot of programming expertise for the department, like to do, for instance, time series autoregressive statistics for autocorrelation, just obscure things. I managed to do the programming very easily. Okay, so I went on and got a master's and PhD in statistics at Carnegie Mellon, and it was the hardest few years of my life. I mean, like 50, 60-hour weeks. And the first year, I had to do grading of papers for the undergrads in order to win my stipend. It was something like $300 or $400 a week. That was a lot of money back then. That covered rent and more. My rent back in the 70s was $170 a month in Pennsylvania. But I went on and got the PhD and finished and I did a bang up job on a great topic that was handed to me on a silver platter by my professor at Carnegie Mellon, and I'm very grateful to him. And this is true of a lot of PhDs in the sciences. They get a break with a certain professor, and the professor kind of hands them a platter. I call it a silver platter, but now I'm involved in precious metal. It was a silver platter. He told me, Jim, there's a guy at Stanford who had a great thesis on the normal distribution. I think you could do it on all distribution. And I did. And it took a couple of years, year and a half. But I got a background in three important areas in industry. The first was quality control. It was at Digital Equipment Corporation. And back in the 80s, they were riding high. It was DEC, D-E-C. They call the guys there a decky. I was a decky, and I was manager of the intramural softball team. We had a lot of fun. My roommate was a manager of the intramural hockey team. No, he was more than that. He was like a vice president of the entire hockey team at Digital. In Boston, hockey is big. Softball was bigger, but that was quality control, okay? And that was very interesting. I did a few things, like one saved $3 million per year per manufacturing plant to streamline the process of quality control and testing of components. They used that across all 25 and saved $80 million a year. What was my reward? An insult from my manager. So I left, and I went to a different part of Digital, to marketing research. I had a monkey, an idiot monkey for a manager in my first 4 years at Digital. So I managed to destroy his old group by hiring away his best people into my new marketing research group. It was the most constructive exercise of vengeance I've ever done in my adult life. I took away 4 of his best 9 people, and his department folded. Okay, then I went from there. After getting laid off, Digital made a number of very big mistakes. not because of our work in marketing research, but because of the arrogance of the founder. His name was Ken Olson, and how they ignored a couple of VP's advice. One was take your VAX, which is a big, powerful computer system that really launched the server model of computing. Gordon Bell said, take your VAX and walk away from it as quickly as possible. And they did not, so they died. They died. Their main computer became obsolete in a matter of 3 years. I went from there to Staples, where my third area of expertise became sales analysis and forecasting. So with quality control, marketing research, and sales analysis forecasting, I covered a lot. I was in charge of the, at Staples, I was in charge of the, seasonality. The seasonal swings. How do you adjust for seasonal swings in order to say we're growing by X? Well, you need to factor in, your slow Easter season. You need to factor in your high back to school season in September. Okay, so it was a lot of fun. I did very well in all three areas. I added to the analytic power of all three groups. And then I got laid off. It's a difficult work environment in the United States. There's a lot of, like right now, I'm hearing from clients, so, gosh, Jim, you wouldn't believe all the 1H green card guys coming from India working at half cost. I lost my job. And I hear about it all over the place. Well, I lost my job in 2003 when they decided to cut me and replace me with two people with a master's degree who earned half as much each. And to be honest, it was probably a good decision for them. They could direct what they wanted from them rather than depend on them for new methods. I provided some new methods for my employer at the last job, and they ran with it, and it was good. I could describe it later, but that's not relevant to the discussion here. So that's my background, and as a result of getting laid off in 2003, with a pretty good salary and a decent job with a good, strong firm that's still around now, I decided not to start the newsletter. I decided to write public articles about gold to compete with the very substandard class of economists. I thought they stunk. I thought they were dumb. One of the dumbest things I ever heard was at 2003. They said gold is starting to rise from all the Palestinian tension. And I thought, oh my gosh, how stupid can that be? Could it instead be the negative real rate of interest because the interest rates were below the CPI inflation rate? Yeah, that was a much more powerful factor in the rise of the gold price. So I started writing articles back in 2003. I wrote about 5 or 6 of them, and I attracted the interest of Ken Rickenbacker, a German economist from the von Mises School of Austrian School of Economics. Austrian school, I think, is excellent, super, sound money. That's what the system will revert to by force or by fracture. And that's what we're seeing now because the dollar is fracturing. And, honestly, I made a forecast. This is kind of funny. I started the newsletter in May of 2004. So I'm in my 14th year now, 15th. I made a forecast that in 6, 8, 10 years, we're going to see the dollar defended by war. That nations better comply and toe the line. That's TOE, by the way, not TOW. You see that a lot of error. TOE, put your toe next to the line, fall in line, be a soldier, follow the US dollar lead. I call it the King Dollar reign of terror. Because right now, Iran doesn't like the dollar. Russia doesn't like the dollar. Well, we don't like Russian energy supply. Iraq and Saddam, he didn't like the dollar. He was selling oil in euros. So if you didn't toe the line, you got a war. And it's always a false pretense for the war. So that's a bit of my background. I do focus on gold. I focus on monetary policy. I focus on the conditions of the economy and major sectors like banking and the housing market. because when they fracture, everything changes and it has an effect on the money system, the monetary system. There's a flood of new money. There's an increase in the gold price. But what we've had now since Lehman Brothers has been a pretty well coordinated attack to increase the money supply, but not to allow the gold price to rise. There used to be a very good correlation between the amount of money and the price of gold. Price of gold would go up if the monetary base went up a lot. That's not the case anymore. We've had a tripling since 2008 in Lehman. Threefold increase in the money supply, and the gold price is flat. So we're creating, pardon me, I have, when I show my face, I have to explain this. I have a lot of allergies. I'm not a drug user. I tickle my nose a lot. I do it a lot. I mean, like 30, 40, 50 times a day. So, bear with me if I go like this. I got a tickle. Okay, so anyway, there's a dislocation now for the gold market. And everybody knows who knows anything.
Gold and silver or just gold?
Pardon me?
Gold and silver or just gold?
Gold and silver, they're together. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but for the longest time, it's gold and silver, and the ratio was pretty constant. But now you're seeing the gold price is rather stable and the silver price slip a bit. So the gold-silver ratio is rising over 70, maybe 75. I don't know what it is lately. And that's possibly because of lower silver industrial demand. But there's still a shortage. There's still a silver deficit. So it could be that silver is just more vulnerable to pounces and to corruption. I'd like to just tell you right now what I believe is the most important few events in the gold market that will result in its release. Okay. One is in London, they've got this new feature called exchange for physical. And what they've done is they've corrupted the entire delivery process now. Their official delivery statistics are like 2 and 3 times larger than what the vaults have in volume. Okay, so that's absurd. So they've corrupted the buying side long ago with, futures contract dumping, paper market dumping. Oops, we just had, in the last 3 hours, we just had 6 months of global gold mine output sold on the market. Okay, they've corrupted that long ago. Now they're corrupting the delivery process in London, and I'm actually enjoying it. I'll tell you why. Because they've thoroughly corrupted it now. They've corrupted both sides. So any legitimate player in the gold market, whenever I say gold, includes silver. Precious metal. I don't like saying precious metal. There's too many syllables. When they've corrupted the gold market, they've corrupted it so thoroughly now with this exchange for physical in London that's been going on for about a year. So thoroughly they corrupted it that all the legitimate market activity is going to Shanghai. I like that. Okay. I like that. I want London to be an empty room where they're just moving paper around and nobody gives a shit. That's what I want to see. I want New York to become an empty room where the only people who enter are the Wall Street guys carrying, a satchel full of paper, not gold. I like that. I want no interest to be there in gold for gold in New York and London. I want it all to go to Shanghai. Of course, there'll be a lot of interest in Johannesburg and Dubai and Singapore and Hong Kong. That's good. That's good. Let's get it out of New York and out of London. So that's a little bit about my background, and that's a big important. Okay, another important event is the introduction of the gold trade note. That's coming. The introduction of the Petro Yuan contract in, I think it was about March, late February, early March in Shanghai. That was a very big, important event. But that completed the gold, oil, RMB triangle in Shanghai. Now I believe atop that futures triangle in Shanghai will come the gold trade note, which will be used perhaps, for instance, by China to pay for Saudi oil. Now that's a serious dagger in the heart of the petrodollar.
Mm.
Okay, amidst all these actions, one other event, this is very, very important. It's the collapse of the Italian banking system, their rebellion against the EU in Brussels, the breakdown of big German banks who own significant amounts of Italian debt, and the collateral damage of the French banks. It's very, very little known that the French banks own 3 to 4 times as much Italian debt as German banks. 3 or 4 times. So if Italy goes down, they're going to hurt Deutsche Bank, probably kill it. They're going to hurt another couple big German banks, but they're going to wreck all the major French banks. That is a big event that could launch gold. Okay, so you've got the destruction of the gold market with the most recent activity of exchange for physical in London, introduction of the gold trade note in Shanghai, and the collapse of the Italian banking system that harms German and French banks, and to the French rather completely. Those are going to change everything. Those events will change everything. And, the funny thing is, you don't read about much of this in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times business section, in the London Times, even the Financial Times of London. So that's what the hat trick letter has to offer. These better focused articles and attention and analysis. It's time once in a while to boast. I've got like an 80 to 90% correct forecast record. This goes back to 2005. I got a long list of correct forecasts, and I need to update them from the last 3 years. Here are a couple of the most recent ones. Germany will flip east. Now that's kind of a sassy short description of a forecast.
Expand on that, please.
Expand on that.
Yeah.
Following the Ukraine war, which was a Langley CIA Mossad Israeli project, not a Russian Crimean based center project at all. They passed out 10,000 amphetamine vials, and they had themselves a coup d'etat, shooting people from the rooftops. Okay, that's the Maidan the Maidan revolt, and in Kiev. The response to that was the U.S. sanctioned Russia. Had nothing to do with Ukraine, nothing at all. It had to do with extreme fear that Europe was going to join at the hip commercially with Russia for the Russian supply of energy, metals, industrial metals, uranium, you name it. I guess uranium is more a Clinton Foundation supply center for Russia, but Russia is huge in energy: oil, gas, aluminum, copper, iron, cobalt, titanium, copper. Russia is enormous. Most Americans can't tell you that Russia has 13 time zones. Most Americans are damn ignorant. I learned it had 13 time zones before I even got to high school. I thought, wow, Siberia is huge. Okay, the impact is so great in potential that if Europe joins firmly with Russia to get not just energy supply, but metal supply and some scientific know-how. Let's face it, the Russians are super in technology, but it's not really shared with the West. You can't say, well, we've got a contract in Silicon Valley. We're aligned with 2 Russian firms that are great for XKGB contract. There's no such thing. The Russians are super in technology. They were equal in the space program. They've got a tremendous MiG and Su fighter aircraft that now puts the Americans in the dust. They've got technology now that I don't want to tell all of my sources. The Russians have some new technology in the last 10 years that makes their military 1 level superior to the United States. And the evidence is with the Sunburn missile, which had its debut in around 2003, the Onyx missile about 4 or 5 years later. And when they did demos, the U.S. military shit in their pants with the speed of the missile and the accuracy of the missile. Like it missed the big crosshairs by 20 meters from 2,000 miles away or from 500 miles away. Whereas the cruise missile, which is about 25 years old, didn't have anywhere near that accuracy. Okay, whenever you see the U.S. and the Russian military have an encounter, like in Syria, the U.S. will back down. They don't have military superiority at all. They just have military propaganda.
Yeah, because everyone would think it's vice versa, that America has the most supreme army in the world. You're saying that's not the case?
Not at all. It hasn't been true for over 10 years. In fact, it's so bad now that I heard from military people who are subscribers, clients of the Hat-Trick Letter. One guy was from Germany, and he said, Jim, I've been with your newsletter for a couple of years. You do good work. Thanks for everything you do. I want you to know something. Here at Ramstein, we have a part shortage. We have like 1/3 of our airplanes that have to be grounded.
Wow.
And when we have this requirement to buy the F-35, we don't want it here because we know it's not very good. It's not better than the F-15 and the F-16. We have to buy it because it's the rule. We have to follow the orders from the generals. We have to follow the military contractors. And these F-35s have problems. Okay, that's one story. There's so many other stories. You have the USS Donald Cook event. Oh my gosh, the Russians jammed the Aegis targeting system on the USS Donald Cook. There's numerous examples like this. Okay, so whenever you see an encounter where the U.S. comes up against the Russians, they back off because the Russians have a superior military. Now, the U.S. might have more tanks. The U.S. might have more planes, but they don't have better tanks, and they don't have better planes. So when you have these skirmishes, it's kind of like a stock price. You don't have all the IBM shares up for sale. You have a small portion, and you need supply and demand in order to set the price. Well, when it comes to military theater, you have a nice focused area like Syria, and you have a confrontation of 10 aircraft versus 8 aircraft. Okay, how'd it go? You don't have 1,300 aircraft versus 1,500 aircraft. You have 8 versus 10, and you find out who's superior.
I see.
And it's the Russians. And now they have the Su-400 defense system, missile defense system. The Saudis are even buying it because they want the best.
And Turkey?
Iran has it.
Turkey? Turkey?
Turkey already has them, but the Saudis.
Okay.
The Saudis are this is really strange. The Saudis made an announcement that they want the Su-400 missile defense system, and then they backed down and said, no, that you misunderstood. No, we didn't. You got threatened, so you backed down on your story, kind of like the Cleveland Clinic when the doctors say that vaccines aren't safe. They lose their job, they recant, and then we're back to where we started. They hire them back again. No, the Saudis are going to be buying Su-400s. They just better shut the hell up about it. They got to shut up. If they announce it and get public about it, they're going to get in trouble. The Saudis are also doing something very, very important and not talking about it. They're already selling all through this 2018 year. They're selling China oil in RMB, and they're not talking about it. They're not taking dollars. They're selling the Chinese oil for RMB, domestic currency. And, you know, to be honest, the Saudis need the RMB currency because they need to recycle it and engage in trade with China to supply their economy, like with motorcycles and clothing and a lot of things, housewares, and maybe some upgrading of their petrochemical business. So a lot of stuff is happening, and it's exciting, but I don't like the potential for disruption. I'm worried about the disruption. I keep hearing from really smart, informed people that we're likely to see like a 90-day period or a 60-day period where a lot of things just don't work. Like maybe for 2 weeks the internet is down, or bank wires don't work for a 2 to 3 week period. It's okay. If you ever saw the movie Blade Runner,
yeah,
they had a Blade Runner 2045 or 2047. Anyway, it was 2040 something. Blade Runner movie, a science fiction movie about the future. They talked about the dark out, the blackout. where
Okay.
data got expunged and there, a lot of things just didn't work and old records went away. That's to protect the cabal for their crimes in the past. Okay, it might happen again. It might happen like in the science fiction episode, that there's so much damaging evidence against Rothschild, against Rockefeller, the Clinton Foundation, the Bush crime family. There's so much evidence out there. They might do in Spanish it's called an apagón, the blackout. Turn off the lights. It's apagar, los luces. Okay, apagar and apagón is the blackout. When I saw the movie, I saw it in Spanish, but I also saw it in English. I like to do both because it helps me. It's a good Spanish lesson. My Spanish is coming along. I've been here just about 12 years, and I'd say I'm like 80% fluent to talk and about 50% or 40% fluent to listen and close to 80% in reading. It's three different types with any foreign language. And the biggest test is understanding Spanish from uneducated people who just don't care how they don't care. They just, okay, I don't know what you said. Blah, blah, blah. I still don't know what you said. And I walk away. I say, okay, if you don't want to talk well, I'm walking away. Bye now. I once told a kid on a bus, I'm sorry, but I can't talk to you anymore because your Spanish is so bad.
Jim.
Okay, so, all right, where do you want to take this?
Jim, I got a list of questions for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, starting off, I'll just go one by one. Take it in any direction that you like. Expand on it as much as you like. Now, inflationary money, fiat versus deflationary money, gold, silver, crypto. What would you say to all those people that keep their life savings in the banks and think that I'm crazy for having a little bit of crypto or a little bit of silver or a little bit of gold? What would you say to those people?
I tell them, don't go full bore into crypto. Be very careful. Now, this is going to sound bad, sound weird, and sound odd. I don't really care because I know it's true. The paper system is going to suffer very severe damage. I think there's coming a wave very soon where the U.S. Treasury bond and the U.S. stocks are both going to get hurt. They're both going to enter a decline. That's going to be a kickstart for gold. It's also going to be a kickstart for crypto. But, okay, I told you this before we went on the air and before we agreed to the interview or on the details, but I'm not a big crypto expert. I'm just becoming well-versed and somewhat informed. I wouldn't say well-informed. I'm somewhat informed. I've got two colleagues out of the 10 in our group. I call them jackass colleagues. They're guys who've been with me now for at least 3-4 years, some 8, 9 years, 10 years. Two of them are pretty good experts. One's a super expert in crypto. And they teach me. But I try to interpret what they have to say. I try to do my own reading. And I believe we're going to see a lot of movement into cryptos, and I think they're going to really come out in 3 different groups, 3 classes. The first will be cash. Like, I got a friend in Liechtenstein, another friend in Holland, another friend in Johannesburg, and I need to move money sometimes. I'd like to do it, quietly under the table. So we're using Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum. Okay, the cash. And I just can't see how that's going to go up a lot in speculative value. It's cash. It's not functional. There's no added value except the efficiency of movement, like the efficiency of moving it from one hand to another, except it's very good at doing it under the table across international lines. I made a forecast, and some of your listeners might cringe to hear it, but I made a forecast in January and early February that there would be a 60% decline in Bitcoin this year. And I had a couple clients in the hat trick letter say, Jim, I think you've got the wrong idea about Bitcoin, and I'm moving into Bitcoin, and I'm canceling your hat trick letter. I said, I'll never forget what I said to one woman in California. I said, well, come on back after you lose 60%. I never heard from her again. Okay, so I do have a decent finger on the pulse. Okay, the cash is one type and class of crypto. Another is the functional token, like Pillar, Salt, Populous. Then you've got another one that's in a completely different class of its own. That's Veritasium. That's like a platform. That's an entire platform. It's like a city which can be populated by online type of businesses. The third class is a little bit weirder because there's too much unknown about it. And that's what I call crypto money. Crypto is backed by gold, silver, platinum, diamonds, oil, etc. But led by those five. I include platinum. Platinum is very important. It's kind of like a close cousin to gold, and it actually looks like silver. I've seen a platinum coin. I thought it was silver. Okay, the functional cryptos, I think, are the place to be. And put in Electronium in that group. It's probably going to be a 10 to 20 to 50 bagger. It just needs to get rooted. And we got our friend, our mutual buddy in how should I say, south of the equator in Latin America, and he's probably smiling right now if he hears this. I'd like to have a little bit of spare cash to do that. Right now I'm dealing with tying up some loose ends here in Costa Rica, which is just loaded with fraud. Loaded with fraud. Every conceivable corner has fraud. And I've got a saying now that I've had some lessons. If you don't have an emphasis in economic development, your default is fraud, corruption, and narco trafficking. So you better get involved in economic development, or you're going to have a country overrun by fraud and narcos. And that might be the situation right now. I like to leave that alone. But anyway, the functionals, like Populous, I'm not an expert. But Populous, from what I hear, is really good at invoicing, and I think it's going to be important for the function of small business lending. Pillar and Salt. Okay, I believe Pillar. Gosh, I might get the two. One of the two. I'm showing my ignorance here. There's one of these two. I'm not sure which it is, but it's going to be important for registering titles, IDs. Car vehicle numbers, boat IDs, airplane IDs, maybe some bonds that are held, corporate bonds that are held. They're going to be all held in, I think it's Pillar. And then the other one is Salt, and I can't remember what it is, but my pro.
Salt is for lending, and Pillar is a wallet.
A wallet. Okay, wallet for IDs. I guessed right. So Salt is for lending. Salt is going to be probably much bigger in business lending than Populous, because Populous is going to be focused primarily in invoicing. But, invoicing is closely tied to the money behind what is paid for the invoice. So they're all very nicely interwoven. I think Veritasium is going to be a huge winner. And I go out on a limb a little bit once in a while, and I try to integrate corruption and crime in my forecast, and that's one of my edges. It's one of my advantages. I've had 3 conversations with PhD economists from the Ivy League schools. One was Harvard, one was Cornell, and I cannot remember the third. And I was amazed at their ignorance. I was amazed at their dark spots. I asked them questions about how the bond market was being supported by derivatives and artificially produced demand with interest rate swaps derivatives. And they went, huh? They have no idea that that's an important integrating factor for keeping bond yields down and their values up. They had no idea. They think that deficit spending is good for the economy. They don't see any potential for debt suffocation. Okay, so I don't know how I got off on that, but oh yeah, here's my veritasium. Not so much a forecast, but an interpretation. I think Wall Street threatened to kill Reggie Middleton.
Oh yeah. Not surprised.
And he decided to be content with the Jamaican stock market instead of capturing the Wall Street stock market and the Chicago stock market and the Vancouver and the Toronto. But that can happen later after he partners with them and potentially sells a portion of his soul. Or he just offers a certain cut and doesn't take the lion's share of potential profit and is very content with being a small billionaire instead of a trillionaire. Okay, that's my impression. I think he got threatened. I heard 6 months ago that there was a lot of conflict going on with Wall Street and Reggie. I've never talked to Reggie. I have one client who has. And he said to me, Jim, I think you're on the right track. Reggie made some hints with some problems that he had and delays, and he wouldn't talk specifics about some delays, and it seemed like he was being threatened. But, you know, if it fits like a threat, sounds like a threat, and has motivation like a threat, it probably was a threat.
If I was to speculate, this is what I would say. I'd say that he was approached and they said, look, you give us the controlling stake, right? And we will do the marketing, we will bring it in, we will make it big, you'll be wealthy, but we run the show. Or if you try and take us on, you're going to die. Something along those lines.
I agree. So if they want controlling interest, does that mean they want 51%?
Nah,
or 60% or 90%? I'm thinking somewhere between 60 and 90.
I'd say
I don't have the experience or contacts to know, but I agree with you completely. So Reggie, as I said before, he has to be content with being a small billionaire rather than a trillionaire. I mean, if you're a trillionaire, you're part of the globalist elite. You're rubbing shoulders with the Bush. By the way, Papa Bush had in 2013 an estimated wealth of $5 trillion.
What? 5 trillion?
30 years of narco trafficking. Yeah, that's easy.
By the way, I got some serious questions here. By the way, I would like to say, I've mentioned this to you before, that on my channel, I don't like to stay outside cryptocurrency strictly because I don't want the unnecessary attention. But since we got Jim here he goes now.
Okay.
Here he goes. This is
wherever you want. That's fine. I'll try to answer. Even politics, I'll answer. Go ahead.
Okay, let's start. I go a few, but let's just go in line. Starting up with FEMA camps. They're all over the place in the US. Some say martial law has started. Some say it's yet to kick in. Most will say there's a financial storm brewing. The collapse is imminent. When is the collapse going to happen? How are FEMA camps going to get involved? How do this tie together? FEMA camps, global collapse. And where would all the unbacked fiat money go to? Could you connect the dots for us, please?
Yeah, these are tough questions. I enjoy the question of when is something going to happen. I usually have an answer, well, it already has. Didn't you notice? Okay, for instance, the question, when is the currency crisis going to begin?
It has
well,
begun.
It already has. I mean, it was true even a year ago. It already has. When are the banks going to begin to fail? Well, they did years ago. Didn't you notice? So now they're saying, when is the collapse going to happen? And I'm saying, well, you know, it already has in the United States. It's a matter of noticing where. We had a collapse in the housing market. That was 2007. I forecasted that a year in advance. We've never recovered. The housing market has not recovered. We had private equity firms go in there and invest here, there, and everywhere, especially in Arizona. And they pumped up the market a little bit for housing, but the rest of the housing market did not recover much. If it weren't for the Chinese coming in, redeeming their treasury bonds for commercial buildings in 20 urban cities in the United States, the commercial market would have collapsed. So we had a collapse in commercial market except for the Chinese infusion. Now we're seeing the result of about 5 years, 3 or 4 or 5 years of subprime lending and really fallacious and stupid underwriting in the housing market and in the car market, the vehicle market, car and truck. So we've had a collapse in the car market. We're seeing a collapse in the housing market now. We already saw it in the commercial market rescued by China. We're seeing a retail collapse with the shutdown of malls, and they're giving improper credit to Amazon for that. Amazon is responsible for maybe, I think, 20 to 30% of the retail collapse. The rest is the economy. I mean, the falsification of economic stories is all over the place. Okay, now we're starting to see a collapse of our society, the fabric, the Black Lives Matter, the NGO groups, the infusion of the Arab human garbage. Sorry, I like that term. When they're 80 IQ and below, no professional skills, stubborn to accept new legal systems, totally unwilling to even look at Christianity except as an object to kill, I regard that as garbage. That's social garbage. And UPS has been doing midnight runs for over 2 years. Every night, UPS is bringing in more undocumented, unvetted, improper immigration. Yeah, UPS, every single night. And it's with a government contract through Langley. Paid for by the globalists, probably paid for by George Soros. He's the biggest enemy to democracy in the world today. The biggest figures in the United States to render harm to the nation are Papa Bush and the Rockefellers. David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller is involved in for instance,